Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and right now, unfortunately, it looks like if the NBA does resume for the 2019-20 season, it'll be a few months from now and likely won't include playing any regular season games. Obviously, nobody knows anything for sure right now, but based off the stories coming out of the league at the moment, it seems like that's the direction that things are headed if this season resumes at all. And as a result of that, the career of my favorite basketball player ever, Vince Carter, is probably over. He announced before the year started that this would be his last season in the NBA after he signed with the Atlanta Hawks, and if there are no more regular season games played in the 2019-20 NBA season, then this is the end of the line for Vinsanity. And honestly, when everything first went down with the Gobert stuff, and that night it became clear that the NBA was going to suspend and live sports as we know it was going to be dramatically different, right? And this idea that the NBA's regular season could potentially be over in that moment, that night I didn't even think about the fact that that would mean the end of Vince Carter's career after that night until I saw on Twitter, him taking the last shot in that Hawks game that was just finishing up as all this other Gobert stuff was going down. And you can't really blame me for not thinking about that, right? There's so many other things going on, but I don't know, it's just unfortunate to be here now, not only for his career to be over, but also for it to have ended obviously much quicker than he had hoped, as the team had a little bit less than 20 games still left to play. And so in today's video, I want to take the opportunity to talk about and explain why Vince Carter is my favorite basketball player of all time, because it's not a story that I've ever told on this channel before. So for me, I really started getting into basketball around 2002, 2003. Nobody in my family or extended family cares at all about sports. They don't follow sports at all. My dad played a little bit of basketball in like grade school and middle school, but that was it. And so him and I would play basketball sometimes in the driveway, but for the most part, nobody was really into sports. And for the first 7 or 8 years of my life, I was pretty much in the same boat, at least as it related to basketball. So I would play video games. I had a GameCube. I had all the typical stuff, Super Smash Brothers, whatever Zelda game was out. I would start to get into Madden, and then I decided to get NBA Courtside 2002. And so that was really what started to hook me to the NBA and to basketball in general, was playing that game, playing in the driveway with my dad. And for whatever reason, I just latched on to the Nets as a franchise. And this is going to relate to Vince here in a second, because all these things start to come together a few years later. But I didn't really have any real connection to the Hornets as a local team for me personally growing up in North Carolina. And I was really invested in college sports. And then once I got invested in the NBA, for whatever reason, the Hornets just didn't appeal to me. And at the time that I got NBA Courtside and that I started getting into the NBA, the Nets were a really good team, and they were one of the better teams in the game, and I really liked playing with them, and they had Jason Kidd. They'd been to the finals 2 years in a row by the time I've been, kind of involved in basketball for a few years. And I just kind of decided, this is my team. I really like the Nets. And a few years later, in 2004, they traded for Vince Carter. And this was a player that I'd always really enjoyed watching him play. He was super entertaining, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people. That 2000 dunk contest performance was a turning point really for his popularity in terms of the widespread fan throughout the entire league, right? So I knew who Vince was. I was like, man, this guy is so much fun to watch. He jumps out the gym. And then all of it kind of came together in 2004 when my team traded for him. And I'm like 9, 10, 11 years old, something like that. And I loved watching Vince Carter play. And there's the athleticism aspect of it. There's him and Jason Kidd playing together, all the lobs, all the alley-oops, running up and down the floor, playing in the fast break. All that stuff was super entertaining to me. But he was also such a good scorer, and everything looked so smooth. And athletically, there were just things that he could do that most other players couldn't. And on a night-to-night basis, it was pretty likely that you were going to see something from Vince that other players in the league just couldn't do, right? And this was a time in my basketball, my sports fandom, that really the entertainment aspect was all that I cared about, right? I didn't fully understand the parts of the game that go into winning, and I didn't fully understand or really care about, trades and free agency and player dysfunction and team dysfunction and all the on and off the court stuff that goes on and super teams. I didn't have an interest in it. I didn't comprehend it. I didn't care about it. The only thing that I cared about was guys that were fun to watch. My interest in basketball was so pure and so basic. And Vince and the way that he played, and to a certain extent the way those Nets teams played, at least for a while, satisfied that part of me, that kid part of me that just loved basketball and wanted to watch it in an entertaining way. And for that time period in my life, there was no more entertaining player to watch play than Vince. With the high-flying dunks, I would watch, whether it be stuff about him on TV or mixes or whatever I could find, whatever videos I could find of just all of these incredible dunks from earlier in his career with the Raptors, and then now with my team with the Nets. He had a couple of dunks that are just forever etched in my mind with the Nets, whether it's a reverse alley-oop to win the game or the dunk on Alonzo Mourning where it just completely shoves him out of the way at the rim. And that like heightened my love of basketball because it was just so entertaining, and I could see how much fun this stuff was at its peak. And for me, Vince Carter was the peak at that time. Obviously, there were better players in the league overall, but from a pure entertainment aspect, Vince was the best, in my opinion. And there's so many things now historically that he has under his belt. He has, in my opinion, the best dunk contest performance of all time in 2000. That was a great dunk contest overall, but his performance specifically, especially at the time, was simply incredible, in my opinion, the best ever. He has the best in-game dunk of all time with the dunk in the Olympics in 2000 or 2004, whichever one, when he completely jumped over the guy. And that was the first time that I remember watching a basketball clip and thinking, how is that even possible, right? That's the best in-game dunk in basketball of all time, in my opinion. And then he has a couple of other titles of the best in-game dunker ever, again, in my opinion, and the best unofficial old man dunker ever in the NBA. The fact that this guy is 40, 41, 42 years old and still getting up there and still putting down dunks is incredible. And throughout his entire career, he was someone that I followed and I rooted for and just, had a special place within my own fandom of the NBA, and that I always wanted him to succeed. And it wasn't always perfect, right? Like from a non-kid perspective, if you were someone, like if it was me now closely following the NBA, I don't know that I would have loved Vince as much as I do, because certainly there were some team dysfunction issues. There was some trade requests that might have come through. There was him moving to all these different teams. His transition from, this all-star caliber player to potentially a role player on other teams went smoother as he went throughout his career, but initially it wasn't great. It wasn't perfect, right? But for me, as an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, he was the perfect player on my team. And that is where my fandom of Vince came from. And now for his career to be over is crazy, because he's been a part of the league for so long. He's played in NBA games in 4 different decades. He's the only guy that can say that. And he has just had simply an incredible career. And obviously going to end up being a Hall of Famer at some point. And it sucks that his career is now over, but I mean, you can't say that he didn't get everything out of the NBA that he possibly could have. And I don't know. I wanted to kind of talk about why he's my favorite basketball player ever. And at the end of the day, like, that statement isn't just about, his greatness as a player, because there's so many different debates that you can have, right, about who's the greatest player of all time and who was the best at their respective positions. From a pure fandom entertainment standpoint, there's no player in NBA history that I look back on more fondly than Vince Carter. And adding to that is his longevity throughout the NBA, throughout his career, his ability to transition into different roles, how explosive of an athlete that he was. I mean, truly a guy that looked like he was floating through the air in his time in Toronto and his early years with the Nets. His effortless ability to score the ball. I always thought that his shooting stroke was so nice and so clean. He had this little kind of falling away jump shot for him that always just made everything look so effortless. Anytime he got to the rim, whether it was a dunk or not, it was seemingly a spectacular finish, whether it was a layup or a spinning dunk or a spinning layup or reverse or whatever it was. This guy's got probably 10 of the best in-game dunks of all time. There's just no comparison for me. And it's one of those things that, logistically, logically, it's probably inaccurate, right? Like, there's no way that Vince should be my favorite NBA player ever, in accordance with a lot of the other things that I believe about the NBA. But from a pure entertainment standpoint, that's never going to be taken away from me. And the kid in me is always going to love Vince Carter, is always going to, think back on those Nets days fondly, even though the team success was never really there when he was there. And really throughout his career, the team success has never really been as high as maybe you would hope that it would be for a player that was averaging as many points as he was and was as talented as he was. But at the end of the day, I can't deny that he's my favorite player ever. And maybe for some of you in my audience that are a little bit more involved in the international scene of basketball, it won't come across this way, but this is really ironic that he is my favorite player ever, because from a collegiate standpoint, I'm an NC State fan and alum, and Vince Carter went to UNC, and so those two things should completely butt heads, but I never think about him as a UNC player. I think about him as a Raptors player, as a Nets player, and all these other teams that he's played for, as you can see on the shirt. And I'm sad that it's over, but I'm glad that he got everything he could out of his career. I wish he would have been able to finish out this season regularly, and as I'm sure everybody else does. And obviously, in the long run, overall, this is a minor thing that Vince Carter doesn't get to play the last 15 games of his career. But I felt like it was appropriate and necessary for me to make a video talking about why this guy's my favorite player ever, and just kind of saying goodbye to his career, unfortunately, at this point. But I appreciate everything that he did for the game, and really was one of the building blocks in my fandom of the NBA. And without him, I don't think I would have become even remotely as big of a fan of the league and of the NBA as I am. And yeah, there you have it. That's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.